In the quiet suburbs of Tacoma, Washington, a boy named Theodore Robert Bundy was born in 1946. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him. Raised by his grandparents and told that his mother was his sister, Ted's early life was steeped in secrecy. He grew up intelligent, charming, and well-spoken, traits that would later become his deadliest weapons. Ted Bundy was, by all appearances, the boy next door. He studied psychology at the University of Washington, volunteered at a suicide crisis center, and even worked on a political campaign. But beneath this polished exterior, a darkness brewed, an obsession with control, domination, and violence. It wasn't until 1974 that women began to vanish. College campuses across Washington state were gripped with fear as young, dark-haired women disappeared without a trace. The only common thread? A handsome man with his arm in a sling, asking for help, carrying books or loading a sailboat. The tactic was simple, yet sinister. Once the victim agreed to help, Ted would knock them unconscious and drive off in his tan Volkswagen Beetle. That year alone, he abducted and murdered at least 6 women. He would later confess to many more, but the true number of victims remains unknown. Estimated to be more than 30, though some believe it could be far higher. Bundy was a master of disguise, not only in the physical sense, but emotionally. He knew how to play the system. After moving to Utah, he joined the Mormon Church and began law school. Meanwhile, women continued to disappear. In 1975, Bundy was finally arrested during a routine traffic stop. Police found burglary tools in his car: crowbar, ski mask, rope, and handcuffs. It was enough to make them suspicious, and soon he was linked to multiple missing women. However, lacking solid evidence, the case moved slowly. Bundy was later charged with the kidnapping of Carol Duranche, one of the few women who escaped his grasp. During his trial, Bundy acted as his own attorney, relishing the attention and manipulating the courtroom like a seasoned performer. But he was convicted and sentenced to prison. Yet this was far from the end. In 1977, while being transported to court in Colorado, Bundy made his first escape. He jumped from a second-story window and disappeared into the mountains. He was captured 6 days later, but he wasn't done. Months later, he escaped again, this time through a hole in the ceiling of his cell. By January 1978, Bundy resurfaced in Florida. He had traveled across the country undetected and arrived in Tallahassee. There, he committed one of the most brutal attacks of his life. In the early hours of January 15th, he entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Within minutes, he had bludgeoned and strangled 2 women to death and severely injured 2 others. He then attacked another student nearby. The violence was frenzied, and the killings more vicious than ever before. 2 weeks later, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Her remains were later found in a pig shed. This act marked a horrifying shift. His killing spree was not just continuing, it was accelerating. But Ted's luck was running out. In February 1978, he was pulled over by police for driving a stolen vehicle. This time, he couldn't charm his way out. His fingerprints confirmed his identity. He was finally caught for the last time. Florida, 1979. The nation watched in stunned fascination as one of the most notorious serial killers in American history prepared to stand trial. Not just as the defendant, but as his own attorney. Ted Bundy, who had evaded the law, escaped prison, and left a trail of bodies across the country, was finally facing justice. He arrived in the courtroom wearing a suit, clean-shaven, calm, and confident. The trial for the Chi Omega sorority house murders had begun, and Bundy saw it as his grand stage. The cameras were rolling, and he played to them like a seasoned actor. He smiled, cracked jokes, objected frequently, and tried to discredit witnesses with skill and charm. But no amount of courtroom theatrics could hide the gruesome truth. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Survivors of the attack testified with trembling voices. Bite marks found on one victim matched Bundy's teeth. Bundy, who had insisted on representing himself, tried to refute the forensic evidence, but the damage was done. The jury saw through the performance. The mask was slipping. On July 24, 1979, Ted Bundy was convicted of the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, and the attempted murders of Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner. He was sentenced to death, but that wasn't the end. Another trial awaited him for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. This time, Bundy's tone changed. He tried to appear vulnerable, even spiritual. His then-girlfriend, Carolyn Boone, moved to Florida to support him. In a bizarre twist during the penalty phase of the trial, Bundy proposed to her in open court while questioning her as a witness. She accepted. By doing so in the presence of a judge, the proposal was considered legally binding under Florida law. In 1980, Bundy was again found guilty and sentenced to death for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy was now on death row at Florida State Prison, but he wasn't done manipulating. For nearly a decade, he used every legal tactic to delay his execution. He gave interviews, claimed he was innocent, then hinted at confessions, dangling the promise of information to keep himself alive. Behind bars, he remained an enigma. To some, he was a monster, to others, a puzzle to be solved. Psychologists and criminologists interviewed him, trying to understand what made him kill. Bundy began to admit to more murders, dozens across multiple states. He described how he hunted women, how he returned to their bodies, and how he couldn't stop. In his final days, Bundy gave a chilling warning. "We are your sons, and we are your husbands, and we grew up in regular families." It was a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. It can look like the boy next door. January 24th, 1989. Outside the Florida State Prison, a crowd had gathered. They held signs reading, "Burn Bundy, burn." As dawn broke, a cheer erupted. Ted Bundy had been executed in the electric chair. He was 42 years old. His ashes were scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, the same region where his killing spree began. Ted Bundy's case changed America. His crime spurred advances in forensic science, criminal profiling, and the way law enforcement shares data across state lines. He remains one of the most studied serial killers in history, his life a warning about how evil can hide in plain sight. Bundy wasn't just a killer. He was a manipulator, a liar, a narcissist, and perhaps worst of all, a mirror. A mirror reflecting how society often overlooks danger when it's wrapped in a charming smile. He looked like the guy next door, but he was a nightmare behind a smile. Ted Bundy's story isn't just about murder. It's about how evil hides in plain sight, and how society often ignores the warning signs when danger wears a charming face. Mad detective, but what if Bundy wasn't the only one? What if others like him are still out there, smiling, blending in, waiting? You've heard of Ted Bundy, but do you know the face of the next one? Bell subscribe to uncover more chilling cases. Candle, stay aware. Stay curious. Stay safe.